2021 ended like a month ago, so why am I making a top 10 video now? Because weeb shit is long. Only one of these made the list, and this one didn't even come out in 2021. But seriously though, try 13 Sentinels, it kicks ass. I also played a ton of games across every major platform. I played indies, AAA games, random crap on PlayStation Plus, random crap on Game Pass, and by the way, almost half the games on this list are on Game Pass. I swear, Phil didn't bribe me. I even played Turnip Boy Commits Text Evasion, which is actually my number 11 pick. It's such a great game, it's pretty cheap on PC and Switch, and there's also a JoJo reference in the game. I even tried out a few remasters, which I'm not going to count, because if I did, Mass Effect Legendary Edition would instantly be number 1, because it's a goddamn masterpiece. And Hades finally released on PlayStation and Xbox. I thought it was also worth mentioning, because just like Mass Effect, Hades is freaking awesome. But unfortunately, there are some games that I missed, like that Aliens game, and It Takes Two. There's also Inscription, Crest Tales, Sable, and Metroid Dread, which are some really good games that I've started but never got around to finishing. But anyway, here's my completely biased top 10 list, starting with this. I didn't expect much from Forza Horizon 5 because I'm not much of a racing game guy, or a car guy. The last racing game I genuinely enjoyed was Mario Kart Double Dash on the GameCube. But Horizon 5 was launching on Game Pass day 1, so why not? I downloaded it, and I played it, and guess what? It's really fun. From the title screen and the opening sequence, I knew that this game was gonna be visual ecstasy. I love the look and feel of Mexico in this game. I love driving around the mountains, the fields, and all the towns. The sand, dirt, and water animations all look so detailed. Forza Horizon 5 is hands down one of the best looking games I've ever played. And there's so much to do. There's a mix of professional and casual racing. You can participate in the Horizon Festival, you can do tasks for any of the locals, you can challenge random people on the road to races, or you can just be a maniac and destroy everything. And the cars. Like I said before, I'm not much of a car guy, but I gotta admit, these look really nice. I love downloading other people's designs. I got a Mario Kart themed McLaren, and I can also drive a Dodge Bronco. And I can also customize my horns. They got the Windows XP shutdown sound. Imagine getting into a car accident and then the final thing you hear is this. Overall, Forza Horizon 5 is just a really simple game, but it's also a really fun one. Well anyway, on to the next game, which is... When Scarlet Nexus released, I skipped out on it. It looked like a generic anime game. And then a few months later, it ended up on Game Pass. Damn, that's 2 out of 10 games on this list that I played on Game Pass. So just like Forza, I thought, why not? And then this game surprised me. Scarlet Nexus is an action RPG. It's kind of like Bayonetta, but with the social bonding crap from a game like Fire Emblem or Persona. So here's the premise. A group of soldiers known as the OSF have these powers because of this brain technology thing, and they fight these monsters called Others. There are 2 main characters, Yuito and Kasane, who each have their own campaign. But each of their storylines have different details and twists that make the entire plot come full circle. But what I love most about Scarlet Nexus is the combat. As stated before, the combat is similar to Bayonetta. It's a fast-paced hack and slash where time can slow down if you dodge an enemy perfectly. Both Yuito and Kasane have the gift of psychokinesis. This is where Scarlet Nexus stands out. While beating the crap out of others, you can also mix your superpowers into your various combos. Yuito and Kasane can have these bond episodes in which you could earn extra perks and get some development from some of these side characters. The game isn't without flaws. When playing through both storylines, that means having to replay many of the levels more than once. Oh, and the story does go off the rails towards the end. There's this whole thing with a moon cult, and the characters keep saying entanglement, so in the last few hours of the game, all I could think of was this. But despite these problems, I really dug Scarlet Nexus. I do hope it gets a sequel. The world building is interesting, and it's a concept that could be explored more with the addition of new characters and different powers. But enough about weeb shit, onto some guns. Everything was riding on this game. 343 delayed it a whole year because if they mess this up, it's a wrap for Halo. The multiplayer dropped. I heard it was fun, but it had a ton of issues with progression. Personally, I didn't care much about the multiplayer, but the campaign, however, is pretty damn good. I really like navigating the open world using sliding, grappling, and of course, vehicles. The shooting and movement during battles also felt refined and fast-paced. It is a shame that there is no co-op at launch, because I could see roaming this open world with friends becoming a ton of chaotic fun. The addition of the grapple shot makes things so much better. Going in, I didn't think this weapon would make that big of a difference to the Halo formula. I was very wrong. Swinging from point to point makes me feel like a god. On top of that, I can pull weapons towards me, I could launch myself into enemies, I could even steal vehicles. I'm calling it now, nearly every first-person shooter will have some form of this weapon. And I know the story isn't considered to be the strongest, but I really dug it. Like, I actually got really invested into the story and the characters. The constant banter between Master Chief and the weapon, who's basically his new AI companion, is one of the biggest standouts of the campaign. Despite the disaster of a development process and some of its missing features at launch, I enjoyed the hell out of Halo Infinite, and I'm up for whatever is next. And up next is a game from much earlier in 2021. I started off 2021 playing through the Hitman trilogy. The main character is Agent 47. He's assigned to walk into a location and assassinate some targets. It's kind of like a puzzle game. In each mission I have to gather information on my target, come up with a plan, and execute said plan. The formula generally remains the same across all three games. These maps are huge and full of ways to interact with people in the environment. It really invites players to replay the game multiple times, and I also love how the game doesn't take itself seriously at all. The writing and the situations that Agent 47 puts himself in become pretty on the nose at times. There's this dark nightclub with huge John Wick vibes, full of other agents trying to hunt 47 down. There's another mission in which 47 infiltrates this fancy party at a wine vineyard. I explored the place and it led me to this underground Wonka-esque wine factory full of death traps. And of course there is the acclaimed Dartmoor mission in which 47 disguises himself as a detective, solving a murder mystery in this mansion, all while trying to murder one of the mansion's residents. With the exception of the final mission, each map is extremely fun and full of replayability. I can't wait to see what IO does next with Agent 47. Did I say Agent 47? No, I meant 007. They're making a goddamn James Bond game. Like IO and James Bond, that's an amazing combo right there. And at number 6, we have more weeb shit. Lost Judgment is the sequel to the spin-off of the Yakuza franchise. First game is my personal favorite title in this whole Yakuza cinematic universe, so I was ready for the sequel. So Lost Judgment has the former lawyer turned detective, Yagami, investigating bullying at a school in Yokohama. The plot starts off pretty slowly, but as the game goes on, Yagami finds himself digging a deep rabbit hole involving much darker crimes. With this game being developed by Ryu Goku Studios? Yeah, with this game being developed by Ryu Goku Studios, many of the assets, most notably the open cities, are reused. Though the refined lighting and the liveliness of both Kamurocho and Yokohama all look great. I don't know how it plays on the PS4, but it looks great on the PS5. And on top of that, the newly added school feels like a whole other mini open world itself. Yes, most of the first half of Lost Judgment is spent in this building, but for the most part, this is where Yagami partakes in the school stories. These are a separate series of side missions in which Yagami investigates a crime conspiracy happening within the school. Ryu Goku Studios could have easily cut this part out and released it as a paid expansion, but they didn't. They included an entire 20 to 30 hour long story on top of the main game. And the combat, although very familiar, is still a ton of fun. Beating up people with a bike in these games will never get old. Lost Judgment is more of what makes the Yakuza games great. There's fun combat, there's an excellent story by the end, there are some weird ass side missions, Sega arcades, and a lot more. Up next is a little indie game that really went under the radar. Okay, so in 2020, there was a game called Among Us that blew up and ended up everywhere.
Stop posting about Among Us!
The concept of Among Us is simple, but it can be used and adapted in numerous different ways. This is where Gnosia comes in. This game was developed by an indie studio called Petite de Hoto. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but it consists of 4 people. It was originally released in Japan in 2019 for the PlayStation Vita, but in 2021, the game released in the West for the Switch. Gnosia is a social deduction game with a sweet hand-drawn art style and a chill soundtrack. The protagonist wakes up in a spaceship with a bunch of other characters. One of them is a Gnosia, an alien that acts like one of the crew, but has one mission, and that is to eliminate everyone in the ship, because time loops back to where the protagonist wakes up, though this time, a different crewmate is the Gnosia. So now you have to figure out how to escape the time loop, or spend eternity playing this twisted version of Among Us. At the start of each loop, a discussion begins among the characters in order to figure out who the Gnosia is. And then everyone votes on who gets eliminated and put into cold sleep. And then once the day ends, the Gnosia eliminates a crewmate. The process repeats until the crew, or the imposter, wins the game. So Gnosia starts off as this character-driven version of Among Us, but the gameplay and the story get a lot more complex and twisted the more I play it. I found myself taking notes on my phone and constantly checking the character bios to figure out who the imposters are. Overall, it has a full cast of interesting characters and an extremely satisfying conclusion. Gnosia is definitely worth trying out for anyone who is looking for something unique and addicting. Up next is another excellent indie title. Death's Door is a small indie game developed by the team of 2 from Acid Nerve. It's centered around this crow who walks into his office building, clocks in, and begins his 9 to 5 as a Reaper. The crow drops into the world of the living and sets off to find some dying souls to help them pass on. It's a pretty simple game that takes elements from mainly Zelda and Dark Souls. Basically, you learn patterns of the enemies and bosses to defeat them. Some items and paths are blocked off early in the game, but you can backtrack when you unlock certain weapons later in the story. The game is really addicting and sometimes punishing, but the combat is so smooth and enthralling. And it's a pretty fast-paced game that wastes no time clocking in at roughly 10 hours. The world building and story are great as well. Death's Door has this mix of witty writing and pretty dark backstories for some of these characters. Just like Scarlet Nexus, I wouldn't mind getting an entire franchise, or at the very least more games from Acid Nerve, because they are a freaking talented duo. And up next is a AAA title that completely came out of nowhere and surprised everybody. I'm not gonna lie, when this game was unveiled back at E3, I thought it looked like crap. It was nice that this was a linear, single-player focused game, but what I saw just looked so generic. Though when I finally got around to playing the game, when it dropped to $30 on Black Friday, I immediately got hooked. The Guardians roam across the galaxy as a group of mercenaries trying to make a name for themselves. While illegally raiding a planet, the crew gets caught by the Nova Corps and have to pay off a massive fine. It starts off as a pretty simple story, but it quickly descends into a chaotic journey in which the Guardians must band together to save the galaxy. The combat of Guardians of the Galaxy is nothing groundbreaking, but it's still pretty fun. But the only playable character is Peter Quill, surprisingly not voiced by Chris Pratt. His main deal is that he can shoot bullets, but he can also give commands to the other Guardians: Gamora, Drax, Rocket, Groot, you know them. What sticks out most about the combat are the huddles. When a meter fills up, Peter can call the rest of the Guardians over so he can give this cheesy motivational speech. Upon selecting the right words, every character gets buffed as licensed AD music starts blasting from Peter's Walkman. The huddles have created many great moments throughout the game, such as this one time where I obliterated a boss while Never Gonna Give You Up was playing in the background. The strengths of this game really show in its writing. I understand why Guardians of the Galaxy won Best Narrative at the Game Awards. There are so many little moments throughout the game that make these characters stick out. In the first half of the story, there are these various flashbacks set during Peter Quill's time on Earth. These flashbacks never mess with the story's momentum and manage to make Quill's backstory much more dark and tragic compared to the movies. And as I played through each level, I naturally learned more about each of the other characters. I got to know their backstories, their hobbies, what ticks them off. There are some memorable little moments, such as Peter finding out about Gamora's doll collecting hobby, or everyone helping Rocket get over his fear of water. The writers did an amazing job in making these characters feel human. I like to support games like this. There aren't any microtransactions or battle passes. The writers don't try to constantly shove the possibility of a sequel or a potential Disney Plus show down your throat. This is just a simple game with a great story. And up next is the game with the tall vampire lady. Of course, Resident Evil Village is on this list. Capcom has been on a roll with this franchise lately. 7 and the 2 remake were top tier games, and 3 was fun despite being pretty rushed, though it did kinda hinder my hype for this year's installment. I thought that Capcom's yearly releases would bring death to this franchise. Fortunately, Resident Evil Village did not disappoint. Capcom really listened to the feedback and mixed the best elements of each Resident Evil game. It's got the first-person camera from 7, it's got a Mr. X-like stalker enemy in the form of Lady Dimitrescu, it's got that show merchant who says, "What are you buying?" at one point, and it's got the return of Briefcase Tetris. And there are a ton of creative designs for all the enemies and bosses, from the Lycans, to these vampires that the entire fanbase is simping for, to the baby. If you played the game, you know about the baby. But Resident Evil Village is a super fast-paced and unpredictable amusement park of horror, and I love every second of it. I can't wait for whatever Capcom does next. Like, apparently it's a Resident Evil 4 remake. I don't think it needs to be remade, but you know what? I'll try it out. So what is my number 1 game of the year? We've heard on and on about the 13-year wait between Kingdom Hearts 2 and 3. Well, this game took 16 years. Psychonauts 2 is a triple G game. It's a goddamn great game. It took everything that worked in the first game and provided more. It took what was dated about the first game and made improvements. This is like a PS2 era collectathon platformer with modernized graphics and tighter controls. After the events of the first game and the VR spinoff, Raz is now working as an intern in the Psychonauts headquarters, and it's not long until he once again becomes involved with another secret conspiracy involving this villain who was taken down by the Psychonauts years ago. Double Fine took the world building from the first game and really expanded upon it, moving from the setting of a summer camp to the very expansive Psychonauts headquarters, also known as the Mother Lobe. Yeah, this game is full of puns. This sequel reveals more about the characters, the lore, the history, and the levels, which are set inside the brains of the various characters, are as fun and creative as ever. There's this hospital that doubles as a casino. There's a cooking show where you boil, chop, and fry actual living food with like faces that can like talk, kind of like that movie Sausage Party. And my favorite is this Beatles inspired level in which Raz has to bring a band back together with each member representing each of the 5 senses. Oh, and I love how creative these enemies are. Like, for example, there are regrets. These are enemies that fly around and drop stuff on you, weighing you down. You get it? And the plot is excellent as well. It's compelling, sometimes dark, and it gets surprisingly wholesome by the end. The best way to pitch Psychonauts 2 is this. Here's a 3D platformer with a concept similar to Pixar's Inside Out, but with the slightly dark tone and quirkiness of a film from Laika. You know Laika, Coraline, Paranorman, Kubo and the Two Strings, good stuff. I implore anybody with a game console or a PC to give Psychonauts 2 a shot. So those are my 10 favorite titles of the year, and only 4 of them were on Game Pass. So no one can say I was bribed by Phil Spencer. Son of a bitch!